In February 2003, in a quiet residential area on the outskirts of Hunan Province, China, after a prolonged heavy rain, a headless skeleton suddenly emerged from the decayed soil. The overwhelming stench prompted residents to call the police. Investigators quickly arrived at the scene. As they dug deeper to examine the site, they had no idea that what lay beneath would lead to a murder case spanning 7 years, with twisted and grotesque details beyond imagination. The victim was a foster mother, the killer, the very son she had once taken in. For 7 years, he used his own body to fulfill her perverse desires, until he chose to end it all in blood. This relationship wasn't simply wrong, it was the ultimate distortion of filial love, a long cycle of dependence, control, and disguised intimacy under the name of repayment. How could it last that long? And what drove a gentle adopted son to become a murderer? The answers will unfold in this chilling case file. Before we begin, please like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss upcoming videos. The son mentioned here is Wang Kun. In 1980, at just 15 years old, he left his poor village in Hunan and traveled to the city alone, hoping to earn money to send back to his aging mother and 2 younger siblings living under a leaky roof. Every day, Wang Kun worked 2 shifts at a small eatery near the market, slept under the stairs, and used public water taps to bathe. Despite the hardship, he always kept his clothes clean and behaved politely, earning admiration from many. It was at this eatery that he met culmination, a sharp-eyed, middle-aged office worker from the Environmental Resources Department. She often stopped by the eatery after work, always choosing the table near Wang Kun, asking about his family and hometown, and eventually asked him to call her Aunt Lin. Her early gestures of care carried a warmth that Wang Kun, a lonely boy in a strange city, deeply craved. Gradually, their relationship went beyond meals. Culmination invited Wang Kun to her house on weekends, taught him how to dress, how to talk like a city person, bought him new shoes and warm clothes, and called him her adopted son. A year later, when her youngest daughter moved to another province for work, Wang Kun officially moved into the small suburban house. Once home to 4 of culmination's sons, now only 2 remained. In 1993, at the age of 28, Wang Kun formally held a ceremony to recognize culmination as his mother. On paper, he took on a new name, Wu Hui. On the outside, people saw a heartwarming story of motherly love in the city. But behind closed doors, a twisted life built on power and desire was slowly taking shape. At the end of 1993, culmination's husband started working on a remote construction site. In that quiet 3-story house, the only man left was Wu Hui. Seeing Wu Hui still working temporary jobs with unstable income, culmination used her old connections to secure him a clerical position at a state-owned company, a job many his age could only dream of. Wu Hui knew this was the greatest opportunity of his life. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he silently vowed, "As long as I still breathe, I will repay this kindness." From then on, Wu Hui took care of everything around the house, from painting doors, fixing pipes, to pushing the car for maintenance, never letting culmination lift a finger. A few years later, thanks to his outstanding work performance and dedication, Wu Hui was specially appointed as a supervisor at a manufacturing plant. In his early 30s, he became the symbol of an adopted son who changed his fate. But while his career soared, culmination began to deteriorate. She was diagnosed with a goiter and became visibly frail. Deeply grateful, Wu Hui never left her side, taking her to appointments and preparing every dietary meal. One late afternoon, on their way back from the hospital, just past a residential area, culmination suddenly asked Wu Hui to pull over. She gave no explanation, only looked at him with a strange gaze. She walked into a small 3-story hotel, rented a room, then turned to Wu Hui and said simply, "Come rest for a bit." Suspicious but unable to resist his habit of obedience, Wu Hui followed her inside. In the room, with the curtains drawn and dim yellow light, culmination, in a cold voice, forced Wu Hui to repay her with his body. At first stunned and hesitant, Wu Hui wanted to retreat. But threats, manipulations, and reminders of his job, future, and gratitude broke him. That night, he lost his moral boundary. But it didn't stop there. Just weeks later, culmination feigned another illness and pulled him into another hotel. This time, she didn't need to threaten him, just said coldly, "Mother needs you." Wu Hui began losing control. Outwardly, he was still the perfect adopted son. But at home, the second-floor bedroom was no longer for rest. It became their secret chamber. The relationship lasted for years. By day, they were mother and son. By night, lovers. They ate together, visited temples together, but behind those rituals was a twisted, taboo bond. Wu Hui never considered it love. For him, it was filth, pain, and imprisonment. He started seeking girlfriends online, connecting with female colleagues, with one hope: to escape this sickening mother-son tie. When culmination found out he was dating a coworker, she couldn't hide her displeasure. She made excuses to delay meals, called him repeatedly at midnight, and even staged a fall down the stairs to interrupt his date. At first, Wu Hui remained patient. But he gradually realized that she was deliberately sabotaging his relationships. Every action aimed at one goal: cutting off all his romantic ties outside. In private conversations, Wu Hui gently suggested ending everything. But culmination refused and continued to force him into submission. Every time Wu Hui rejected her, she would flip, hurl insults, dig up the past, and even threaten to accuse him of taking advantage of an older woman. The noose tightened. Wu Hui didn't dare get angry or walk away, because even one accusation could destroy the career he worked so hard to build. Culmination even began showing up at his workplace, causing scenes over petty issues, creating noise so colleagues would notice, and humiliating him in front of his superiors. Wu Hui's girlfriends initially sympathized with him, but gradually distanced themselves. No one dared enter a family where the foster mother interfered so aggressively. Sensing growing resistance from Wu Hui, culmination shifted tactics. In early 2000, she introduced him to a woman named Tu Min, modest in appearance with a respectable background. Initial surprise gave way to relief. Wu Hui saw this as a possible escape and embraced the relationship. After several dates, he and Tu Min decided to pursue it seriously. According to local customs, the groom's side needed a small engagement offering. Culmination didn't object. She even lent Wu Hui 1,000 yuan to fulfill the tradition. The household seemed to have found peace, and everything appeared on track. But just 2 days after the formal introduction, culmination suddenly changed her attitude. She met with Wu Hui, expressed strong opposition to the marriage, and demanded he retrieve the engagement gift. Tensions reached a peak. Wu Hui felt insulted and deeply intruded upon. He could no longer remain submissive. For the first time, he expressed his anger directly, as though his limits had been shattered. Faced with Wu Hui's firm stance, culmination reluctantly relented, agreeing to let the wedding proceed, but with a condition. Wu Hui and his wife must live nearby so she could be cared for. Coincidentally, the house next door was available for rent. Culmination quietly arranged it using her connections to secure the property for Wu Hui. With no other option, Wu Hui and Tu Min moved in right next to his foster mother. On July 5, 2000, Wu Hui and Tu Min held a proper wedding ceremony. Everything was well prepared. But on the big day, culmination suddenly caused a scene. During the reception, she stormed into the guest area and knocked all the dishes off the tables. Not stopping there, she stomped on the broken plates, ruining the entire atmosphere. In the chaos, she slipped on a liquor jar, fell hard to the floor, and injured herself. The guests were shocked. Wu Hui was humiliated and couldn't look anyone in the eye. But because of his complex relationship with culmination, he could only endure it silently. After getting married, Wu Hui was determined to end the abnormal relationship with his foster mother. He limited contact, kept his distance, and tried to build a normal family life. However, culmination wasn't ready to let go. She constantly pressured him and insisted on keeping a key to his new house for convenience. Reluctantly, Wu Hui handed it over. From then on, every time Tu Min wasn't home, culmination would enter unannounced, lock the door, and force Wu Hui to sleep with her. Sometimes, Wu Hui had to lock the door from the inside to avoid her. But culmination would scream and curse from outside, as if they were a feuding married couple, bewildering the neighbors. Wu Hui was puzzled by the strange behavior and unusual sexual appetite of a woman over 50. When he consulted a doctor, he was told that patients with hyperthyroidism could experience hormonal imbalances. causing excessive physical and sexual stimulation. Even when Wu Hui used health as an excuse to avoid her, culmination dismissed it as an excuse. To her, every reason was just an act of evasion. As for Tumin, though she didn't know the exact nature of the relationship between her husband and his foster mother, culmination's attitude made her uneasy and distant. Culmination's constant visits and arguments with Wu Hui disrupted the neighborhood. Some residents filed complaints with the local police. Under pressure from authorities, both were summoned to a mediation session. They were required to sign a reconciliation agreement. In it, Wu Hui promised not to use harsh language with his foster mother, and culmination agreed not to enter his house uninvited. She would bear all consequences if anything occurred. Additionally, Wu Hui had to send culmination 100 yuan per month as a support stipend. Everything was signed in the presence of local officials. After this event, tensions temporarily calmed. Peace seemed to have returned, but trouble flared again over a seemingly trivial matter: naming Wu Hui's newborn son. Specifically, when Tumin gave birth, Wu Hui quietly used his original surname, Wang, to register the household record and birth certificate, without informing culmination. Upon learning the news, culmination became furious. She confronted Wu Hui and demanded loudly that the household registry be corrected. According to her, the child was a Wu family descendant and couldn't carry a different surname. The conflict between them escalated more than ever. During those days, Wu Hui was mentally distressed. He couldn't find a way out. A dark thought began to form in his mind. As long as culmination was alive, he would never live a normal life. At noon on June 18, after work, Wu Hui stopped by a store, bought a small knife, concealed it inside his safety vest, wrapped it in a black plastic bag, and went to find culmination. When they met, culmination continued questioning him about the household registry. Wu Hui diverted the topic, saying it was inconvenient to talk in public, and invited her for a walk. The two walked to a large tree far from the residential area. They sat and talked for nearly 3 to 4 hours. At the end of the conversation, culmination again suggested they be intimate one last time. But when Wu Hui refused, the atmosphere turned tense again. The two began arguing. Unable to control his emotions, Wu Hui used the knife to kill his foster mother. After confirming culmination was dead, Wu Hui hid the body, calmed himself, and left the scene as if nothing had happened. On the way home, he instinctively discarded the murder weapon into some bushes a few dozen meters from the body to erase the evidence. Back home, Wu Hui acted completely normal. In front of his wife, he stayed calm, continued eating, watching TV, and going to work as usual. The next day, when culmination could not be reached, her biological children became worried. They came to Wu Hui's house and asked him to help with the search. Wu Hui appeared helpful, proactively asked questions, made phone calls, and joined in the search. But at the same time, he subtly discouraged hope by saying, "If she's gone missing, she'll be hard to find." After a while, without any visits or trouble from culmination, Tumin asked Wu Hui about it. He simply replied, "I've handled it peacefully. She won't come anymore." Tumin didn't suspect anything. She just felt relieved, believing that after years of tension, they had finally gained some real peace. Time passed quietly. More than a year after the crime, Wu Hui gradually regained stability. The heavy burden he felt in the early days after the murder started to lift. He seemed to cherish his current life more than ever. He told himself, "It's all over. No one will ever find out." A false sense of peace settled over his days. But as the old saying goes, if you don't want others to know, don't do it. At noon on February 23, 2003, a group of children playing near the outskirts discovered a headless skeleton exposed by eroded soil. Police arrived immediately. Beneath the decayed clothes, they found a partially decomposed address book. Using specialized recovery technology, several digits were still legible. From the 4 readable numbers, police began making calls. 2 people answered. When asked, they confirmed knowing a woman named culmination, who had worked with them around the summer of 2001. Both stated that culmination had mysteriously disappeared and suddenly quit her job without explanation. At the time, rumors said she had returned to her hometown to live with her foster son. But no one knew her exact whereabouts. Using these leads, police expanded the investigation. They interviewed Kang Mei-lian's husband to confirm her personal relationships. The husband said Kang Mei-lian had no enemies, only occasionally played mahjong with friends, and the stakes were small. At the time of her disappearance, she was 54 and didn't carry any valuable possessions. He also confirmed that while her relationship with her biological children was good, she frequently argued with her foster son, Wu Hui, over daily issues. After much persuasion, Kang Mei-lian's eldest son revealed a crucial detail. He said that once, upon visiting Wu Hui's house, he had to wait a long time before the door was opened. Inside, he found his mother and Wu Hui in a room with disheveled clothes and messy bedding. Feeling uneasy, the son warned his father to be cautious of Wu Hui, even though there was no clear evidence at the time. The suspicion lingered. Police also interviewed Kang Mei-lian's daughter. She confirmed that before disappearing, her mother frequently argued with Wu Hui and strongly disapproved of him dating anyone. Even after Wu Hui got married, Kang Mei-lian often came to their house to cause trouble, sometimes even getting into physical altercations. She also clearly remembered that on June 18, 2001, when the family was searching for their mother and came to Wu Hui's house, his face was scratched and bleeding. His behavior was odd, avoiding eye contact with relatives. Based on the matching timelines and suspicious details, the special investigation team identified Wu Hui as the prime suspect. They secretly monitored his movements, avoided summoning him to prevent alerting him, and widened their investigation. When police approached Wu Hui with shining handcuffs, he wasn't surprised. His face remained calm. No resistance, no questions asked. In the interrogation room, Wu Hui remained silent throughout most of the questioning. Investigators took turns asking him questions, but he remained calm and tight-lipped. Finally, a senior officer looked Wu Hui in the eyes and said, "You're in this situation because of 3 wrong turns: coming to this city, meeting Kang Mei-lian, and getting married." That line pierced through Wu Hui's psychological defenses. He sat in silence for a while, then slowly nodded and said, "Give me a cigarette. I can't hide it anymore, I'll confess." Wu Hui then confessed the entire process: how he met Kang Mei-lian, was adopted, entered into an abnormal relationship, and eventually killed her due to conflict and despair. That was exactly what we saw at the beginning of this video. Based on Wu Hui's confession, police reinvestigated all related individuals and dispatched a team to revisit the scene. There they found 5 cervical vertebrae buried deep in the soil, just as Wu Hui described. All evidence matched perfectly. The case was solved. Wu Hui was officially charged with murder of a serious nature and faced severe legal consequences. In prison, Wu Hui remained calm. When asked by reporters, he simply said, "Honestly, I was a victim too. But I killed her, so I must pay. It wasn't worth it, but it's too late now." The case of Wu Hui murdering his foster mother, Kang Mei-lian, shocked the public. The media reported widely and public opinion split. Some condemned the brutality, others pitied the 20-year-long tragedy. At the preliminary trial, Wu Hui didn't deny the charges. He admitted everything and didn't ask for a reduced sentence. The prosecution emphasized this was a case of extremely serious murder, with a prolonged preparation period, clear intent, and irreversible consequences. The court sentenced Wu Hui to life imprisonment without parole, required compensation for the victim's funeral expenses, and revoked his civil rights during incarceration. During the hearing, no one from Kang Mei-lian's family requested leniency for Wu Hui. Her children remained silent. Tu Min, Wu Hui's wife, was devastated. She only learned the truth after receiving a summons from the authorities. Since then, she severed ties and moved away with their child. Media outlets, women's organizations, and legal experts all weighed in. This was more than a murder case. It was a social tragedy involving ethics, moral deviation, and the corruption of gratitude. The sentence was delivered. 1 life lost, another life confined to prison. The price paid for things no one dared to speak of. To many, this was not just an ordinary murder case. It was a long chain of dependence, manipulation, desire, and unchecked deviation. Gratitude is precious, but no one has the right to use it to demand what others do not wish to give. Knowing something is wrong and still continuing. By the time you realize, there's no turning back. This video concludes here. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. She was a victim of domestic violence from a young age. For 3 long years, little Taylor Cattle was subjected to countless instances of abuse by her stepfather. These immoral acts deeply scarred her soul and left a lasting impact on her psyche. However, when she bravely spoke out about her ordeal, the police dismissed all accusations, claiming she was fabricating the story due to her troubled past. They even threatened to send Taylor back to the orphanage. 3 years of silent suffering. What did her fight for justice look like? Don't take your eyes off the screen. This video will uncover horrifying details and the most haunting truths you've never heard before. Subscribe to the channel now to stay updated on the next heart-pounding developments. Our protagonist, Taylor Cattle, born on June 15, 2000, in Florida, USA. From birth, she never had a real home. Her parents were never married, and her biological father abandoned her and her mother when she was just an infant. Taylor's mother, Rebecca Cattle, was only 19 at the time, an unemployed woman struggling with mental health issues, constantly moving from place to place. Rebecca couldn't provide a stable life for her daughter. Taylor grew up with inconsistent meals, freezing nights curled up on park benches or inside old, abandoned cars. A childhood full of instability. No income, no home, surviving on the charity of strangers, occasionally staying in temporary shelters. Hungry, unkempt, and looked down upon, Taylor gradually built an emotional shield. She became withdrawn and always wary of others. When Taylor was 7, an event changed her life forever. One winter night in 2010, police found her and her mother sleeping inside a pile of discarded cardboard boxes on the street. As a result, Rebecca was arrested for child neglect, and Taylor was placed into the foster care system. The next 2 years were spent bouncing from one foster home to another, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. Just as she would start to feel settled in a new place, she was moved again. To Taylor, the foster system felt like a prison without bars. She had no choice, and no one truly cared about her. A few years later, when Taylor was older, a distant relative couple, Henry Cattle and his wife, decided to adopt her. Taylor thought she had finally found a real home, but little did she know, she was stepping into a nightmare. The Cattle household in Polk County, Florida, appeared like an ordinary home from the outside, but inside, Taylor never felt safe. Within months, she realized something was wrong. Henry acted like a caring father, spending time with Taylor, helping her with homework and reading bedtime stories. At first, his gestures made her feel loved, but gradually, they became too intimate. One night, Taylor had a fever, and her foster mother told her to sleep in their room so she could take care of her. In a daze, Taylor felt Henry's presence beside her. But instead of just checking her forehead, his hand rested on her back, and stayed there for longer than it should have. Taylor, terrified, lay still, too afraid to resist. Another time, on a quiet weekend morning, Taylor was watching cartoons on the sofa when Henry sat down next to her. He wrapped his arm around her. The moment his wife entered the room, Henry quickly withdrew his hand as if nothing had happened. From that moment on, Taylor became more cautious. She avoided being alone with Henry and tried to keep her distance. But the more she resisted, the more aggressive he became, always looking for moments when no one was around. Scared yet helpless, Taylor didn't dare tell anyone. Given her past and young age, it was understandable why she withdrew even further into herself. While she cowered in fear, Henry escalated his advances. From that point on, he violated her multiple times, ignoring her desperate attempts to fight back. The nightmare continued with no end in sight, until one Sunday morning in 2016. Taylor walked into the church with red, swollen eyes, sobbing in a corner of the room. Pastor John Peterson immediately noticed something was wrong. After the service ended, he gently approached her and asked, "Are you okay, Taylor?" Taylor bit her lip, trying to suppress her sobs, but she couldn't hold back anymore. She looked up at the pastor, and for the first time, she decided to speak the truth. "My foster father, he did terrible things." Her confession left the pastor in shock. In the dim light of the church, he saw the terror in her eyes. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and called the police. Within an hour, the Polk County Sheriff's Office dispatched a team to the church. Leading the response was Deputy Sheriff Melissa Turnage, a seasoned middle-aged officer. Taylor was taken to the interrogation room where she was asked to recount everything that had happened. Meanwhile, in another room, Henry Cattle and his wife were also being questioned. Their tone was calm and confident. "That girl always exaggerates things," Henry's wife said, her eyes filled with contempt. Henry sat with his arms crossed, feigning sorrow as he shook his head. "Taylor is a difficult child. We gave her a home, a better life, but she always wanted more. When things didn't go her way, she made up stories to punish us." Melissa Turnage observed Henry for a long moment. Her years of experience allowed her to detect lies, but this time, she didn't want to believe the words of a troubled child. Back in Taylor's interrogation room, Melissa's cold voice echoed, devoid of any empathy. "Are you sure? Are you making this up?" Taylor was startled. She had never imagined that she would be doubted. "I'm not lying," she shook her head, tears falling onto her clenched hands. But Melissa was not convinced. "If you're angry about something, maybe because your phone was taken away, you were punished, or for any other reason, speak up now. Because if you're lying, the consequences will be severe." Taylor was stunned. She realized that no one was on her side. She had gathered all her courage to tell the truth, but instead of being helped, she was treated like a liar. After an intense interrogation, Taylor was taken to the hospital for a forensic examination. The doctors and medical staff worked mechanically. Their scrutinizing eyes, their repeated questions, all made it seem as if they had already decided she was just a troublemaker. When the examination was over, Taylor was taken back to the interrogation room, but this time, no one told her the results. A few days later, Taylor realized something was off. No one mentioned the forensic report, no further investigations were taking place. She wasn't allowed to see her own file, and everything seemed to fall into silence. According to the initial investigation report on Henry Cattle, the forensic tests found no traces of male DNA in the samples and no semen in Taylor's underwear. To the police, this meant that Taylor's accusations were baseless. Melissa Turnage held the report in her hands, her face expressionless as she looked at Taylor. To her, the dry words on the paper carried more weight than the tears of a child. No evidence meant no crime. That was what the police chose to believe. But for Taylor, it meant that justice had turned its back on her. Taylor clenched her fists in anger, staring straight at Melissa. Despite trembling, her eyes burned with defiance. "I am not lying." But her defiance only made the police more convinced of what they had already decided. The pressure mounted, and the fear of being sent back to the orphanage weighed heavily on her shoulders. Melissa's threats echoed in her mind. Pushed to the edge, Taylor did something she never thought she would. She retracted her statement. She said she had lied. The interrogation room door closed, shutting out Taylor's last hope. She was no longer a victim. Now she was a liar in the eyes of the law. No one looked at her with sympathy, only cold, indifferent gazes. In the following days, Taylor lived in confusion and fear. The hearing was approaching, and she knew this wasn't going to end easily. If she didn't comply, she could be taken to court, labeled as a troublemaker. Taylor's foster mother didn't take long to convince her to drop the fight. In the agreement her foster mother had prepared, if Taylor admitted to making false accusations, everything would be forgotten. No one would bring it up again. Henry wouldn't be angry, the police wouldn't bother them, and she would still have a home. Taylor had no choice but to accept. At the hearing, the court accepted the agreement. Taylor was officially convicted of making false statements. Though she didn't go to prison, she had to follow a strict set of conditions during her probation. The first punishment? She had to write a letter of apology to Henry Cattle and Melissa Turnage, a letter expressing remorse for fabricating the allegations and damaging their reputations. The second punishment, Taylor had to attend anger management therapy. They believed she had fabricated the story out of anger toward her adoptive parents, labeling her as a troubled child. The therapy sessions took place in a small room with 4 blank walls. She had to sit across from a psychologist who kept asking her about her anger issues. Why did you feel the need to lie? Are you angry at your foster parents? Do you regret causing all of this? Taylor didn't answer. She couldn't, because the truth wasn't in those questions. After the trial, everything seemed to go back to normal. Taylor still lived with Henry and her foster mother, trying to act as if everything was fine, but inside she was just counting down the days until she was old enough to leave for good. About a month later, one day Henry told Taylor to get in the car with him to pick up a customer, a familiar excuse he often used. She didn't argue. She knew there was no point in resisting. The truck rolled out of the quiet suburban street and onto the highway. Taylor sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, but her mind was tense. She sensed that something was wrong. About an hour later, Henry pulled up in front of a small roadside convenience store. "Wait here," he said before stepping inside. Taylor didn't look after him. She just wanted to get through the trip without any problems. But when Henry returned, he tossed a box of condoms onto the seat between them. A casual throw, but enough to send chills down Taylor's spine. He had a plan. Taylor knew it. He was going to do it again. Last time, she lost her chance to fight back. No one believed her, and in the end, she was the one punished. But this time, she wouldn't let it happen again. As the car continued moving, Taylor started calculating. She had about 10 to 15 minutes, the time Henry usually took to find a secluded spot. She needed to gather evidence, something undeniable. She looked around the car. The radio on the dashboard displayed the time. That could be her first piece of evidence. If she could capture the exact time and location, the police wouldn't be able to ignore it. But more importantly, she needed to record Henry's actions. Her hand slipped into her hoodie pocket, where her phone was hidden. She unlocked the screen, keeping her face neutral so he wouldn't suspect anything. She opened the camera app silently. A small but crucial feature. She could take pictures with just a tap, without making a sound. She had to be extremely careful. If Henry noticed, he could snatch her phone and destroy all the evidence. The car turned onto a familiar road. Taylor recognized the place, a deserted stretch where Henry had stopped many times before. He was getting ready to act. Taylor adjusted her phone, pretending to play a game. Her eyes flickered toward Henry. He was focused on the road ahead, unaware of her actions. The first photo was taken. The radio displayed the time, 16:42 p.m. A small but valuable piece of evidence. Next, she needed to capture Henry's face. She took a deep breath, waiting for the right moment. When he adjusted the rearview mirror, she quickly tapped the shutter. Her heart pounded violently, but she couldn't stop. She had to keep gathering as much evidence as possible. The car began slowing down. Henry was looking for a place to pull over. Taylor knew she had only a few minutes left to act. The truck gradually pulled over to the side. Henry scanned the surroundings, searching for a secluded spot where no one could see him. Taylor held her breath, her fingers gripping the phone tightly, her heart beat so loud she could hear it echoing in her head. The familiar place came into view. A rugged dirt road, overgrown with grass, near a remote intersection in North Lakeland. Taylor recognized it immediately. This wasn't the first time Henry had brought her here. Henry turned off the engine, unbuckled his seatbelt, glanced at Taylor briefly, then opened the door and stepped out. Taylor acted immediately. She lifted her phone and snapped another photo of the dashboard clock, 16:48 p.m. A crucial timestamp, irrefutable evidence. She tilted her phone slightly, switching to video mode. The screen trembled in her hands as the lens captured Henry pacing outside the car, checking the area. He had no idea that every step he took was being recorded. Henry returned to the car and shut the door. He sat down, reclined his seat, and stared at her. The air inside the vehicle grew suffocating. "Lean over the dashboard," he commanded, his voice rough, stripped of the fake gentleness he used before. Taylor froze, but she knew that reacting too quickly would raise suspicion. She slowly leaned forward, keeping her phone tucked beneath her oversized hoodie. As Henry began his actions, Taylor subtly angled the phone and tapped the shutter in silence. The photo was captured. A clear image of him exposing himself appeared on the screen. Taylor bit her lip, refusing to show any reaction. Henry suddenly turned to her, eyes narrowing as if he had noticed something. His voice was sharp. "Put the phone away now." Taylor acted quickly, pretending to tap the screen before calmly replying, "Just closing some apps." She avoided eye contact, keeping her voice as natural as possible. Henry stared at her for a few tense seconds before looking away, seemingly convinced. He had no idea that all the evidence was already stored. Taylor feared that if he realized the truth, he would snatch the phone and erase everything. If that happened, she would be trapped in that living hell for much longer, with no one to save her. She couldn't fight him. Henry weighed nearly 90 kilograms, while Taylor was only 36 kilograms. She had thought about resisting before, but he was too strong, too dangerous. She had only one goal: survive and keep the evidence. If she wanted to hand these images to the police, she had to stay alive first. The horrifying ordeal felt endless. When Henry was done, he sat up, breathing heavily, then pulled up his clothes and stepped out of the car. Taylor remained motionless, showing no emotion. But she didn't miss her chance. As Henry walked to the back of the truck, she discreetly watched him. He pulled out a roll of paper towels, wiped his hands and something on his body, then tossed the used tissues onto the ground. She had to remember that spot. It was a crucial piece of evidence. If the police came, they could find DNA traces there. Henry returned to the car, casually tossing 2 unused condoms into a nearby bush. A swift motion, as if he had done this countless times before. Taylor watched, etching every detail into her memory. He had no idea that this time she was ready to turn the tables. Before Henry got back into the driver's seat, Taylor subtly shifted her foot and nudged the empty condom box under the seat. If the police searched the car, they would find it. Henry sat in the driver's seat, buckled his seatbelt, and looked straight ahead as if nothing had happened. The truck continued down the road. But Taylor knew this time would be different. She had evidence, and she wouldn't let him escape. When they arrived home, Taylor needed to be alone. If she went inside immediately, she wouldn't have a chance to check her phone or call the police. So she quickly spoke up. "I'm taking the dogs for a walk." Henry didn't suspect anything. Seizing the opportunity, Taylor clenched her phone inside her jacket pocket and walked outside, pulling the 2 dogs along. She strolled across the front yard, heading toward the small road near the house. Once she was out of sight, she pulled out her phone and checked all the pictures she had taken. They were all there. The photos clearly displayed the car's dashboard clock, images of Henry outside the truck, and undeniable evidence of his actions. Taylor took a deep breath. She knew that calling 911 would change everything forever. But would the police believe her this time? Or would they accuse her of making false claims again? After 5 to 10 minutes of gathering courage, Taylor unlocked her phone and dialed 911. Her voice trembled slightly as she heard the dispatcher answer. "I want to report a crime. I have evidence." She recounted everything slowly, precisely, without letting emotions interrupt her. The dispatcher was silent for a few seconds before confirming that a police unit was on its way. Worried that her adoptive parents might suspect something, Taylor ended the call quickly, tucked her phone into her pocket, and walked the dogs back home. She didn't want anyone to notice what she was doing. The waiting felt like an eternity. Taylor couldn't sit still. She paced back and forth inside the house, her heart heavy with anxiety. About 15 minutes later, the police arrived. Taylor rushed to them, holding up her phone. She didn't say anything right away. She just opened her photo gallery and held the screen up for them to see. "We'll take care of it immediately," one of the officers said, his voice low and firm. Inside the house, Henry was still unaware of what was happening. Just as he lay down on the sofa, the police stormed in and arrested him. At the police station, Henry neither admitted nor denied the accusations against him, but he knew he couldn't escape this time. Instead of fighting in court, he agreed to a plea deal in exchange for a lighter sentence. He was sentenced to 17 years in prison for his crimes. That meant he would never have the chance to harm her again. Taylor didn't have to testify in court. She didn't have to face him ever again. In 2017, Henry Cattle was officially sentenced to 17 years in prison. He was placed under lifetime probation, and his name was permanently listed as a sex offender. There was no escape, no loophole left for him to exploit. On the day he was taken away, Taylor wasn't in the courtroom. She didn't want to see him, didn't want to hear him speak, didn't want to feel his presence in her life for even another second. It was over. But the pain he had caused still remained, deeply etched into Taylor Cattle's memories. The previous case against her was also dismissed. The wrongful conviction that accused Taylor of making false statements was overturned. The state prosecutor's office issued a no prosecution order, confirming that the allegations against her had been entirely false. They had been wrong. But no one at the Polk County Sheriff's Office apologized. No one admitted their mistake. There was no apology from Melissa Turnage, who had once coldly dismissed Taylor's claims. No explanation from the investigators who turned a blind eye. Their silence was an admission of guilt. But it was also another wound cut deep into Taylor's heart. She didn't need their pity. She just wanted justice. Taylor once thought about suing them all. She had the right to do so. She had enough evidence to expose the negligence of the legal system that had abandoned her. But she gave up, because she knew that no matter what she did, no one could make up for the years of horror she had endured. Her life couldn't be stuck in the past. She had to move forward. She stayed with her adoptive mother until she was old enough. Although she despised the woman for defending Henry, she had no other choice. The days in that house felt like an endless nightmare. Every time she walked past Henry's old room, she still felt a shiver run down her spine. But she was no longer afraid. Now, she was no longer the weak little girl she once was. She was a survivor. Later, she left that house forever, never looking back, not even once. She became independent, starting a new life with ordinary jobs like everyone else. She worked as a cook, a restaurant server, earning her living with her own hands. No one knew who she was. No one knew her story, and she didn't want anyone to pity her. But the mental scars never truly faded. Some nights she still woke up in a panic, feeling as if the ghosts of her past were still haunting her. Years later, Taylor had a family of her own. She lived with her fiancé and 2 young children. Life had changed, but the memories of those dark years would forever be a part of her. This video concludes here. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.
In 2009, in Australia, a family of 5 was brutally murdered while sleeping. Their bodies were severely disfigured, requiring DNA testing for identification. The perpetrator was none other than the brother-in-law, Xie Lian Bin, a relative of the family. The reason behind his actions stemmed from pure greed and jealousy over the family's wealth. Moreover, Xie Lian Bin adopted Lin Ya after murdering her adoptive parents, only to abuse the girl for a long period of time. This video will uncover the dark secrets, tragic stories, and horrifying truths about one of the bloodiest chapters in human history. Please like and subscribe to our channel to explore it with us right now. On the morning of July 18, 2009, at 6:35 a.m., the newspaper delivery employee for the Lin family's stall in Epping, Sydney, arrived as usual. However, the stall's door remained shut, unlike every other day. He felt something was amiss. By this hour, the owner, Lin Min, would usually have opened the door and prepared for work. He immediately called the owner to check, but no one answered. Anxiety started to rise. However, the employee decided to continue his deliveries, even as an uneasy feeling lingered in his heart. Around 9:30 a.m., with no call back from Lin Min, the employee contacted Lin Min's sister, Lin Shu, asking her to check on the situation. Lin Shu tried calling her brother, but there was no response. She decided to visit Lin Min's house with her husband, Shilian Bin. Around 10 a.m., Lin Shu and Shilian Bin drove to Lin Min's house. As soon as they stepped out of the car, they sensed something was wrong. The front door was wide open, but the house was eerily silent. Lin Shu hesitated but stepped into the house, her unease growing stronger. Entering Lin Min's bedroom, she noticed the curtains were drawn tightly, leaving the room in darkness. Suddenly, Shilian Bin rushed from behind and held her tightly. He shouted, "Don't look, get out now." But it was too late. She had already caught sight of the horrifying scene. On the bed lay the lifeless body of Lin Wenli, Lin Min's wife. Her body was covered in blood, and her face was so disfigured it was unrecognizable. Lin Shu screamed in panic, broke free from her husband's grasp, and ran to the next room. There, Lin Min's sister, Lin Yun, also lay motionless on the bed, pale and lifeless. She then rushed to the children's room where Lin Han and Lin Dao were slumped near the wardrobe, both deceased. Lin Shu trembled, unable to stand. Her senses were paralyzed by the horrifying scene. She shakily called the police, her voice breaking. They're all dead." While Lin Shu tried to stay calm waiting for the police, Shilian Bin suddenly called his father-in-law, Lin Yanfei. He quickly said, "Father, something terrible has happened at Lin Min's house. I'll come pick you up now." Lin Yanfei, who was in Maryland, Australia, not far from Epping, but without direct transport, agreed to wait for his son-in-law to arrive. Lin Shu overheard the call and protested vehemently. "Why are you leaving now? I can't stay here alone. What if the killer comes back?" Her voice trembled. However, Shilian Bin seemed indifferent to her concerns. He simply said, "I have to go. Staying here will only cause more trouble." He then left, abandoning Lin Shu to face the horrifying scene alone. Lin Shu felt helpless, panicked, and furious, but had no other choice. About 20 minutes later, the police arrived at the scene. They began cordoning off the area and conducting forensic examinations. When questioned, Lin Shu told the police her brother's family had been murdered, but her brother, Lin Min, was not present at the scene. This statement raised a major suspicion for the police. Could Lin Min be the killer who fled the scene? Initially, the police only recorded 4 bodies. However, upon closer inspection of Lin Min's bedroom, they discovered his body hidden under the blanket. This discovery eliminated the theory that Lin Min was the killer, confirming that this was a massacre targeting all 5 family members. Immediately after discovering Lin Min's body, forensic experts began their examination. Preliminary results showed that all 5 victims in Lin Min's family died from blunt force trauma to the head. Some bodies were so disfigured they couldn't be recognized by their faces. To accurately identify the victims, forensic experts had to rely on DNA tests, body measurements, and clothing. This led the police to conclude that the perpetrator acted with extreme hatred, not just the intent to kill. Although the victim's home was covered in blood, none of the property was disturbed or looted, ruling out robbery as a motive. During the investigation, police found that the perpetrator had cut off the power supply before committing the crime, plunging the house into darkness. However, the killer still navigated and identified each victim's location with precision. Analysis of the crime scene revealed that the perpetrator seemed very familiar with the layout of the house. Every room was opened except one, the room belonging to Lin Ya, the eldest daughter of the family. Lin Ya, the adopted daughter of Lin Min, was studying abroad in New Caledonia on the day of the incident, which spared her from the tragedy. Strangely, her room was untouched, as if the perpetrator knew for certain she wasn't home. These clues suggested that the perpetrator was someone close to the Lin family, or, at the very least, someone familiar with their habits and routines. On September 8, 2009, Lin Min's family funeral was held at Olympic Park. The atmosphere was filled with grief. Lin Ya, the sole survivor, hurried back from New Caledonia to bid farewell to her family. Throughout the ceremony, Lin Ya stood silently, leaning on her grandmother Zhong Feng Jin. Her tear-streaked face could not hide her immense pain. When her grandmother's heart-wrenching cries rang out, Linya broke down into uncontrollable sobs. Linya's teacher, who had been concerned about her mental health since the incident, was also present at the funeral. Observing Linya, the teacher noticed something unusual in one corner of the gathering. Xie Lianbin, Lin Shu's husband, was repeatedly questioning Linya in Mandarin, his tone tense and aggressive. Meanwhile, Linya kept her head down, tears streaming down her face. Although the teacher didn't understand Mandarin, she felt that Xie Lianbin's tone was threatening. Concerned for her student's safety, she immediately reported his suspicious behavior to the police. In fact, the police had already suspected Xie Lianbin due to his earlier odd actions. On the day of the discovery, he had tightly held Lin Shu to prevent her from seeing the bodies, a strange reaction for someone witnessing a crime scene. When Lin Shu pleaded for him to stay at the scene to guard against the perpetrator returning, Xie Lianbin insisted on leaving. This raised suspicions that he knew for certain the killer wouldn't return. Moreover, Xie Lianbin's physical description matched the profile of the suspect the police had constructed. He frequently played badminton, was in good physical shape, and had a key to Lin Min's house, allowing him unrestricted access. He also knew about Lin Ya's absence due to studying abroad. Shoe prints found at the crime scene ranged from sizes 8.5 to 10.5, while Xie Lianbin's shoe size was 9.5, a perfect match to the evidence. This coincidence placed him at the center of the investigation. Before moving to Australia, Xie Lianbin was an ENT doctor in China. However, his career faced challenges after immigrating. Unable to find suitable work, Xie Lianbin relied on financial support from Lin Min and his wife to open a Chinese restaurant. Unfortunately, the local market was saturated, and the restaurant went bankrupt in 2005. Since then, Xie Lianbin stopped working and depended on stock investments to make a living, but his unstable knowledge led to inconsistent earnings. In contrast, Lin Min's newsstand flourished, generating annual revenues of up to 1 million Australian dollars, which made Xie Lianbin extremely envious. Police speculated that Xie Lianbin's motive was likely rooted in greed, intending to seize control of Lin Min's newsstand. After the murders, he and Lin Shu quickly took over the business. Connecting the clues, the police theorized a plausible scenario. On the night of the crime, Xie Lianbin gave Lin Shu sleeping pills to ensure she wouldn't wake up. He then quietly went to Lin Min's house. After cutting off the power, he used a heavy object, possibly a hammer, to kill the three adults, Lin Min, Lin Wenli, and Lin Yun, instantly. Finally, he used the same method to kill the two children. After committing the murders, he disposed of the weapon and returned home to sleep as if nothing had happened. Suspicion alone wasn't enough. Police needed direct evidence. They decided to keep this theory confidential to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. At this point, a crucial detail caught the investigators' attention: the guardianship of Lin Ya, the 15-year-old girl who had just lost her entire family. Xie Lianbin, who was considered the prime suspect, quickly expressed his desire to adopt Lin Ya. Police found this move unusual. However, since Lin Ya's grandparents, Lin Yangfei and Zhang Fengjin, were elderly and unfit to care for her, the authorities had to carefully deliberate their decision. Ultimately, they decided to let Lin Ya stay at Xie Lianbin's house, but under strict monitoring to ensure her safety. The reason the police agreed was that Xie Lianbin acted when Lin Ya was abroad, suggesting he had no intention of harming her. However, this was only a temporary measure as they continued to seek evidence to solve the case. By late 2009, after noticing Xie Lianbin's increasingly suspicious behavior, police decided to implement surveillance measures. They began wiretapping his phone calls. On January 19, 2010, police secretly entered Xie Lianbin's house to install micro-cameras, hoping to capture incriminating actions or confessions. During the surveillance period, police observed that Lin Shu was showing signs of depression. The loss of her loved ones made her sensitive, vulnerable, and easily manipulated. Lin Shu clung to her husband, whom she considered her only support during the crisis. Thus, she agreed to all of Xie Lianbin's demands, despite many of his actions being highly suspicious. However, Lin Shu was also a key witness in the case. Her initial statements supported police suspicions against Xie Lianbin. but over time, her testimony changed inexplicably. In her first statement in July 2009, Lin Shu admitted that she was unsure whether Shi Lianbin left the house on the night of the murders. She also said he had tightly held her to prevent her from seeing the bodies. But just a few months later, she changed her testimony. This time, she firmly stated that Shi Lianbin never left the house that night. She explained that she was very sensitive to sound and would have woken up if he had. When police suggested that Shi Lianbin might have given her sleeping pills, she immediately denied it, saying it was impossible. These contradictions raised even more doubts. Lin Shu even changed details about the crime scene. Initially, she claimed to have seen the bodies before Shi Lianbin held her back. Later, she said he held her first before discovering the bodies. Through covert video surveillance at their home, police discovered that Shi Lianbin frequently told Lin Shu, "The police are suspecting me. You must stand by me. Only I can be with you forever." These manipulative words led police to believe that Shi Lianbin was exploiting Lin Shu's vulnerability to conceal the truth. The video also showed that Shi Lianbin appeared to have absolute control over the household, and Lin Shu's actions and words were heavily influenced by him. To test Shi Lianbin's reaction, police provided Lin Shu with false information, claiming they found bloody footprints at the crime scene matching a pair of Asics sneakers, Shi Lianbin's favorite brand. Police further stated that the shoe size from the footprints perfectly matched Shi Lianbin's size. After revealing this, they closely monitored his reaction through the cameras. That evening, Shi Lianbin appeared flustered. He searched through old shoeboxes at home, soaked them in water, shredded them, and flushed the pieces down the toilet. This behavior did not escape the police's notice. On January 11, 2010, after gathering additional evidence, police secretly sealed off Shi Lianbin's house without his knowledge. They began a 4-day operation to collect evidence. On May 13, 2010, a crucial discovery was made in Shi Lianbin's garage, an oval-shaped stain measuring 2 centimeters in length and 6 millimeters at its widest point, dubbed stain number 91. Initially, it was dismissed as an ordinary stain. Upon reanalysis, prosecutors confirmed it to be a bloodstain. This stain contained the DNA of 4 victims: Lin Min, Lin Han, Lin Dao, and Lin Yun. Surprisingly, stain number 91 also contained the DNA of an unidentified woman. In May 2011, more than a year after the crime, police decided to arrest Shi Lianbin. Immediately after his arrest, Lin Shu scrambled to testify on behalf of her husband. Meanwhile, Lin Yangfei and Zhong Fengjin, both in their 80s, tirelessly fought for justice for their family. In December 2015, the trial of Shi Lianbin officially commenced. Shi Lianbin faced sharp questioning from the prosecutors, but continuously insisted, "I didn't do it." Lin Shu even testified that her husband had an alibi, claiming he never left home on the night of the murders. However, complications arose when forensic experts confirmed that the unidentified DNA in stain number 91 could belong to either Lin Shu or Lin Ya, which weakened its evidentiary value in implicating Shi Lianbin. Shi Lianbin's defense lawyer argued that the blood stain could have been left accidentally before the crime occurred. This caused the trial to reach an impasse, creating an opportunity for him to evade justice. Seeing that Shi Lianbin was about to be acquitted, police couldn't remain idle. They approached one of his cellmates, referred to as Inmate A, offering reduced sentencing and a $4,000 reward in exchange for information from the suspect. Inmate A agreed and quickly built a close relationship with Shi Lianbin. He bragged about his connections to corrupt police officers and offered to help clear Shi Lianbin's name if they became friends. Over time, Shi Lianbin began trusting Inmate A and vented his frustration and resentment toward the Lin family. Shi Lianbin claimed he was wealthier, smarter, and more capable than Lin Min, whom he saw as a common laborer. He also expressed bitterness about not receiving respect from Lin Yangfei and Zhong Fengjin. During one conversation, Shi Lianbin confessed that he had given Lin Shu sleeping pills to carry out the crime. He also admitted that picking up his in-laws was a pretext to dispose of the murder weapon. When police presented the gathered evidence to the judge, they still faced challenges. The judge ruled that the evidence was insufficient to convict Shi Lianbin. After 4 years of interrupted trials, on December 8, 2015, Shi Lianbin was acquitted. However, the case remained shrouded in unanswered questions. At this point, a shocking twist occurred. A letter from Lin Ya, Shi Lianbin's adopted daughter, was sent to the prosecutor, revealing disturbing allegations. Lin Ya claimed that she had been a victim of prolonged abuse since 2008, and it was time for the truth to come to light. In the letter, Lin Ya detailed how Shi Lianbin began harassing her when she was just 14 years old. After the tragic deaths of her family, Lin Ya moved in with Shi Lianbin. However, the following months were far from peaceful. She endured abusive behavior but remained silent for years, not understanding the severity of the situation at her young age. These revelations dealt a significant blow to Shi Lianbin's image, which had been portrayed as a victim of a flawed legal system. Prosecutors quickly reopened the case. They revisited overlooked evidence, particularly the infamous stain number 91. With the new evidence, Shi Lianbin was summoned back to court. On January 12, 2017, the jury reached a near-unanimous decision. 11 members found him guilty, with only one dissenting vote. The court officially sentenced Shi Lianbin to life imprisonment without parole for 5 counts of murder. This verdict not only served justice, but also brought solace to the victim's surviving family members. Upon hearing the verdict, Shi Lianbin maintained an eerie calmness. He even smiled and waved at his lawyer. His cold demeanor silenced the courtroom, but outside, tears from the Lin family spoke volumes. Finally, after years of relentless struggle, justice was served, and the surviving family members could begin to find peace. Lin Ya, now an adult, appeared strong before the media. She stated that her decision to speak out was not only for justice for her family, but also to protect other potential victims. She asserted that no matter the challenges, the truth must always be revealed. This video concludes here. Thank you for following this gripping story. If you found it engaging, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more thrilling stories.